remember this? Do you remember that? Do you remember this? As we sit back and we reminisce,
reflecting on the present made me think about the past. With my Walkman used to listen to music during class. One of my saviors, when constantly heartbroken. Girls would play me out, but music kept my mind open. Remember Sunway College was the very beginning. Got tight with Nina, that it was the Bone Thugs I was mimicking. It's funny how I hated her early on. Later on formed a group together known as Firstborn Troops. Our first gig netted 40 ringgit, 40 cents a small show, but to me it was the main event. Hooked up with the label nearly, we refused in the end, he turned off his shit clearly. Was friends with Ultimate over the net. Remember how we got rushed by the cops in Subang over the graffiti set. We've been through a lot, through thick and thin. To thank you guys, I don't know where to begin. You remember this? Do you remember that? Do you remember this? Do you remember that? Do you remember this? Do you remember that? Do you remember this? As we sit back and reminisce.
let's take a trip down memory lane as history plays in the back of my brain like in the day. I used to stay up all night just to write, dreaming of gripping mics and keeping it right all by my lonesome, till I found a crew to do it with me. Remember our first gig at the Music City. Remember fooling around at the Zanzibar when we was recording the EPRB Rap Stars. I remember 97 London at the Hippodrome when I challenged Emo to battle up on the microphone. I remember writing a letter to Naughty Max telling them the album is why I started writing raps. I remember show wrecking, no mic checking. Who would have thought we'd be here rhyming on a second? Deja vu, I tell you what I'm gonna do. Smile when I reminisce about the crew.
Listen. Do you remember this? Do you remember that? Do you remember this? Do you remember that? Do you remember this? Do you remember that? Do you remember this? As we sit back and reminisce.
Love could be like this as I reminisce times back when we had fun. No worries, my baby. Never knew love could be like this as I reminisce times back when we had fun. No worries, my baby. I reminisce, biting my lower lip, back to when I first spoke and when I first wrote my rhymes in. How it felt like to lose the one you love. Take a step back, let go, experience rebirth and reclimb. Read the daily signs, watch how your true colors shine. Looking back at these moments in time, hip hop is like this as I reminisce. Like the time I had my first kiss, or when I fell in love with music. To all my peoples we grew it, from the EP to the first, still into it, TTC till infinity. How we do it, keep the reels of bittersweet memories. Close the chapter 1 and 2 and move on to 3. I never knew love could be like this. I never knew sadness hurt or bliss till I met you, so I reminisce.
Do you remember that? Do you remember this? Do you remember that? Do you remember this? Do you remember that? Do you remember this? As we sit back and reminisce. Reminisce.